Panorama. Beat the road like panorama. Heart I love, but I love me bacchanal. Love a bacchanal bad. The place mash up when we start to get on bad. Look the girl them ready, ready, ready. Look the truck man roll all tongue in tongue. Whole day we drinking rum. Tell them don't slow me down. No, look how we beating road like a panorama. Inside the air. Look how we beating road like a panorama. Panorama, panorama. Inside the air. Come let me start the bacchanal right now, but now wind down. It all business. Tell them we born bad, mashing up everywhere. If they feel them all mad, we follow, we play. And we go win. And we go win. And we go win. Something about the pan when you hear the sound. That is the Q carnival coming round. Give them pan men a round of applause. Oh God. Look the girl them ready, ready, ready. Look the truck man rolling, rolling, rolling. And there's 1,000 girls coming down. Whole day we drinking rum. Tell them don't slow it down. No, look how we beating road like a panorama. Panorama, panorama. Inside the air. Look how we beating road like a panorama. Panorama, panorama. Inside the air. Come let me start the bacchanal right now. Take a jump and a wind down. Tell them it's the time of the year, and we know business. Start the bacchanal right now. Take a jump and a wind down. Tell them it's the time of the year, and we know business. Tell them we born bad, mashing up everywhere. If they feel them all mad, we follow, we play. And we go win. And we go win. And we go win. Look how we beating road like a panorama. Panorama, panorama. Inside the air. Look how we beating road like a panorama. Panorama, panorama. Inside the air. Come let me start the bacchanal right now. Take a jump and a wind down. Tell them it's the time of the year, and we know business. Start the bacchanal right now. Take a jump and a wind down. Tell them it's the time of the year, and we know business. Tell them we born bad, mashing up everywhere. If they feel them all mad, we follow, we play. And we go win. And we go win. And we go win. Baby, time is never enough. Even if we try to turn back the clock, just you and I, the present is us. So let we enjoy this now, girl. Do it all over, drunk or sober, so high like a stoner. Time to feel the feeling again. All over, drunk or sober, so high like a stoner. Time to give them again. Like a throwback baby, throwback baby, throwback baby. Like back in time, back on my girl. Throwback baby, throwback baby, throwback baby. Like back in time, back on my girl. Go back, go back, go back. Throwback, throwback, throwback. Go back, go back, go back. Till the feeling come again. Go back, go back, go back. Throwback, throwback, throwback. Go back, go back, go back. Till the feeling come again. We are alive, the present is home. So don't let your pride keep you alone. Some things in life we cannot control. So let we enjoy this now, girl. Do it all over, drunk or sober, so high like a stoner. Time to feel the feeling again. All over, drunk or sober, so high like a stoner. Time to give them again. Like a throwback baby, throwback baby, throwback baby. Like back in time, back on my girl. Throwback baby, throwback baby, throwback baby. Like back in time, back on my girl. Go back, go back, go back. So let we enjoy this now, girl. Do it all over, drunk or sober, so high like a stoner. Time to feel the feeling again. All over, drunk or sober, so high like a stoner. Time to give them again. Like a throwback baby, throwback baby, throwback baby. Like back in time, back on my girl. Throwback baby, throwback baby, throwback baby. Like back in time, back on my girl. Go back, go back, go back. Throw back, throw back, throw back. Go back, go back, go back. Till the feeling come again. Go back, go back, go back. Throw back, throw back, throw back. Go back, go back, go back. Till the feeling come again.
I don't care what nobody say. Every carnival I done day. Plus Trini. Oh, cause they love how Trini does look. And they like how Trini does cook. And they like to hear Trini talk. And they like Trini woman walk. And we make good company. Yeah, and we make good company. And we make good company. See me done. We just dictate all the place, partner. We just represent for we soca. We just sell out all the strong liquor. We just represent for we soca. Them say we mad and we bad. I'm telling you, where we from? We're from Trinidad and Tobago. I's a Trini. Proud Trini. Oh, cause they love how Trini does look. And they like how Trini does cook. And they like to hear Trini talk. And they love Trini woman walk. And we make us company. And we make us company. And we make us company. See me done. Boy, I party until it rain. I dressing up in my red, white and black. I don't care what nobody say. Every carnival I done there. Plus I know all artists and all the mass bands. Them say I'm a man. I'm telling you where I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. I's a Trini. Proud Trini. Oh, cause they love how Trini does look. And they love how Trini does cook. And they like to hear Trini talk. And they love Trini woman walk. And we make us company. And we make us company. We just dictate all the base partner. We just represent for we soca. We just sell out all the strong liquor. We just represent for we soca. I'm telling now, see me done. You ready? The swanky. She went to play she mask, but forget she am banned. So they push she out. Yes, they push she out. I see she jump over the fence and watch she climb over the roof, but they push she out. I see they push she out. What she do? Wind to the side, wind to the side, wind to the side, wind to the side, wind to the 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 side. Woman in front, man behind. Everybody come and join the line. Wind to the 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 side. She go in VIP, but forget she complimentary, so they push she out. Yes, they push she out. She tell the man she went to pee, but he don't really want to hear she, you know. So they push she out. Push it out. What you do? Wind to the side, wind to the side, wind to the side, wind to the side, wind to the 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 side. Woman in front, man behind. Everybody come and join the line. Wind to the 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 side. You ready? Yeah. The swan girl. If you feel it in your vibe and you feel it in your waist, then come and swan along and take a kiss. Wind to the side, wind to the side, wind to the side, wind to the side, wind to the 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 side. Woman in front, man behind. Everybody come and join the line. Wind to the 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 side. You ready? Yeah. The swan girl. If you feel it in your vibe and you feel it in your waist, then come and swan at this. Wine to the side, wine to the side, wine to the side, wine to the side, wine to the 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 side. Woman in front, man behind. Everybody come and join the line. Wine to the 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 side. You ready? Yeah. Just swanky. I'm telling now, feminine.
Panorama, beat the road like panorama. Heart I love, but I love me bacchanal. Love my bacchanal bad. The place mash up when we start to get on bad. Look, the girl them ready, ready, ready. Look.
Okay, everyone, a very special good evening to each and every one of you, and we do apologize for the slight delay. I would ask everyone to please stand at attention as we stand for the national anthem. Thank you all. I ask that you all remain standing as I invite to the podium Miss Nicole Francis Collins to say the prayer. Miss Francis Collins is also chairman of the Caroni East constituency. Francois, sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can we bow our head, close our eyes? Heavenly Father, as we stand before you this afternoon, thanking you for bringing each and every one of us here safely. Father, this evening proceeding, Father, let it be done in decency and in order, Lord. Father, I bring the political leader, the executive before you of the party. I ask you to keep them as one, keep them grounded, and strengthen them, Father, to weather this storm that we are going through right now, Father. Father, we ask you, Lord, for everyone that is here, to continue to bless them, Lord, cover them, Lord, from the crowns of their head to the soles of their feet. And Father, when the evening proceeding is over, God, I ask you to carry each and every one of us home safely to our destination. In no other name, but in the mighty name of your Son. Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Nicole Francois Collins. Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, it's certainly a pleasure to welcome you here today in Chaguanas in Balisier House Central for today's consultation on Stand Your Ground legislation. But before I move forward, allow me to recognize, in her absence, the Honorable Penelope Beckles-Robinson, political leader of the People's National Movement and the leader of the opposition, who is out of the country serving the people and doing the work of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The Honorable Marvin Gonzalez, chairman of the People's National Movement and member of parliament for Aruca Lopino. All party officers, including deputy political leaders, and allow me to recognize Deputy Political Leader Ms. Jennifer Batiste Primus, Lady Vice Chair, the Honorable Nian Gatsby-Dolly, and I see we have our party's election officer, Mr. Indar Parisram as well. Members of Parliament, other members of Parliament, senators, heads of local government corporations, esteemed panelists, specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, and those viewing live, good evening. My name is Vyash Nandlal, and I will be the moderator for this evening's national consultation on Stand Your Ground legislation, hosted by the People's National Movement. I welcome each of you who are in attendance here today in Balisier House Central in Chaguanas, and those of you who are listening live and viewing live virtually. Today's consultation, in keeping with the PNM's objective of educating, informing, and listening, is designed to be interactive and allow for discussion with our panel, as well as to hear your views on this very serious matter of national importance. In our format, we intend to have opening remarks by the chairman of the People's National Movement, followed by a brief presentation on Stand Your Ground legislation, at which time we will invite our esteemed panel to come to the front and take their seats. Then, ladies and gentlemen, we will engage in a brief discussion with our panel on the matter of Stand Your Ground legislation and how it impacts you. And after, we will have the opportunity, you will have the opportunity, both those of you here in the audience and those of you virtually on social media who are looking at us live, to pose your questions and your comments and to have a discussion with our esteemed panel on this matter of Stand Your Ground and Stand Your Ground laws. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further delay, let us commence our program. Firstly, we have our opening remarks, and to give our opening remarks, it is my distinct pleasure to bring these opening remarks, an attorney at law and a distinguished public servant and committed patriot. He has served Trinidad and Tobago with distinction, holding key cabinet portfolios as Minister of Public Utilities and later as Minister of National Security, where he demonstrated strong leadership, resilience, and vision in managing some of this country's most complex challenges. Today, he continues to contribute to the highest levels of public life as the chairman of the People's National Movement, Chief Whip, and Member of Parliament for Aruca Lopino. In these capacities, he has been a steadfast advocate for the people, a guardian of parliamentary integrity, and a leader committed to advancing values and the principles of the People's National Movement. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in warmly welcoming the Honorable Marvin Gonzalez, Chairman of the PNM and MP for Aruca Maloney.
Thank you very much, Vias. Let me stand on the protocols already established, but to also recognize my colleagues in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, as well as my colleagues in the leadership of the People's National Movement. To you, members of the community of Chaguanas, listening and viewing audience on social media, national media, welcome to the PNM's second rounds of consultation on this very important issue and bill being proposed by the government that is referred to as Stand Your Ground. I want to thank the honorable political leader of the People's National Movement and leader of the opposition, Mrs. Penelope Beckles-Robinson, who is at this point in time ably representing Trinidad and Tobago at the United Nations General Assembly. And we in the PNM should feel a sense of pride that at least we have one senior office holder, a constitutional office holder, that will ably represent our interests in Trinidad and Tobago. She's going to get up very early in the morning and she will attend all events promptly on time. If it's one thing we are short of, is that. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very important issue for us in the People's National Movement and by extension Trinidad and Tobago. The issue of crime and violence and criminality have been with us for a very long time. Governments in the past passed several legislation, made a number of social interventions in our quest to tackle this problem from its root causes, and in many instances, not really at its root causes. But for the last 20 or 25 years, most political parties that occupy the corridors of power had crime and criminality as one of the most pressing issues under previous PNM governments and under previous UNC governments. So let us not bury our heads in the sand that crime is a social issue that somehow should only captivate the mindset of the PNM. Between the years 2010 to 2015, the UNC declared a state of emergency under the then Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar in response to this crime situation. In last year, the previous PNM government declared a state of emergency in response to certain intelligence information that came to the government with a recommendation from national security agencies that a state of emergency should be declared in order to deal with a particular pressing issue. Shortly after the general elections this year, the government, purportedly acting on the advice of the Commissioner of Police, declared a state of emergency that currently we are still in response to some aspect of crime. In the election campaign of 2025, the Prime Minister, leader of the opposition as she was then, campaigned, and perhaps rightly so, on this very issue of crime. And in that campaign, she promised that if she were to be elected Prime Minister, she is going to introduce Stand Your Ground and use that as perhaps one of the main ways in which we can tackle crime in Trinidad and Tobago. When the Honorable Penny Beckles-Robinson was appointed leader of the opposition, shortly after the general elections, she told the media in our presence that this PNM government will collaborate with the government on any piece of legislation once it is good legislation that will advance the affairs and advance the country of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So she gave that undertaking. The reason why we are here today is because the government put forward a piece of legislation that they campaigned on, and they give the impression that if this legislation is somehow enacted in Trinidad and Tobago, it will be a silver bullet to our crime problem in this country. But I told my colleagues privately and in the parliament that if the people of Trinidad and Tobago are to really understand what is being proposed by the government. You need not only look at the bill that is being proposed, and Senior Counsel Larry Lala will go into the various clauses of the bill, but you have to look at other things that the government is doing and to connect the dots with this piece of legislation. You cannot examine the provisions in this legislation and ignore some of the rhetoric of the Prime Minister when she makes statements as blow them into pieces. When she proposes through her minister the establishment of gated communities. You cannot examine this legislation and understand its full effect if you ignore some of the things that she would have said in her campaign about loading up the Matic. You cannot ignore her statement when she openly threatened her ministers to bust their heads. These are very, very critical things. And we will be doing ourselves a disfavor if we are to ignore these public utterances and just look at the provisions in this particular bill, ladies and gentlemen. We in the PNM are prepared to support any bill and any piece of legislation that would help any government in the fight against crime. And let me make it abundantly clear, contrary to what we are reading in the papers, where an office holder said that if I succeed in my job in the fight against crime, the opposition is going to look bad. I want to make it abundantly clear that the PNM in opposition will do everything in its power to ensure that we have safer streets and safer communities in Trinidad and Tobago. And it does not matter to us who holds the reins of power at the point in time, or who occupies the position of Chief of Defense Staff, or Police Commissioner, or Prison Commissioner. It does not matter to us. Once office holders hold true to their oath of office and do what they must do to protect the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And finally, I want to say that no piece of legislation is going to eradicate crime and violence in Trinidad and Tobago on its own. None whatsoever. The Prime Minister and her ministers are attempting to fool the people of Trinidad and Tobago by offering red meat, pretending as though it is going to comfort you that once this bill is passed, everyone will be armed with a firearm. And Larry will go into details with that to show you that it is further from the truth. That somehow when this legislation is passed, every home will have a firearm and everyone will have the capacity to shoot at a criminal who might be entering their homes. Nothing is further from the truth. I want to tell the Prime Minister, on behalf of the Leader of the Opposition and in my capacity as Chairman of the PNM, that to deal with the issue of crime and violence in Trinidad and Tobago, you need to buckle down and do very difficult work. Work in the criminal justice system, the reform of our bail system, the reform of the DPP's office, police reform, social justice reform. These are the things that will deal with the root cause of crime in Trinidad and Tobago. And anything else that is being offered as a solution is an attempt to fool the people of Trinidad and Tobago. You can just watch what happened recently with cases before the courts. Look at what is happening with the DPP's department not filing indictments on time, and after 10 years facing serious criminal charges. Some members of the public facing serious criminal charges have to walk away free. How is Stand Your Ground dealing with these very serious criminal justice issues in Trinidad and Tobago? How is Stand Your Ground legislation going to deal with the issue of corruption in our prison system? How is it going to deal with corruption in our police service? These are the issues that one expects a serious government to buckle down and address. Because no stand your ground legislation is going to answer those very difficult decisions that we must tackle as a country. And if Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar is unprepared to tackle those very serious issues in Trinidad and Tobago, the PNM stands ready to tackle those issues on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So I want to thank our esteemed panelists, Senior Counsel Larry Lala, and please give him a round of applause for the work that he has been doing. In his absence, our Deputy Political Leader, Mr. Sanjeev Budu, for the great work that he is doing. Our Senator, Janelle John Bates, who will be joining the esteemed panelists to share her experience as an attorney at law as well as a legislator. And of course, we have our psychologist, Mr. Sule Joseph, who did and really performed admirably at our last Stand Your Ground policy and consultation. I want to thank him very much for that. And we look forward, in true PNM style, to a very informative consultation here in Chaguanas. And I look forward to you participating, asking serious questions. And when you ask those questions, whether or not our citizens are listening in their homes, in their vehicles, wherever on social media, that they can be truly informed on what is being proposed as a government. And our legislators who are sitting here would listen to your concerns, and those concerns will be expressed on the floors of Parliament when we enter our Parliament to conduct the debate and to make sure that your views are represented when we are debating. So thank you very much for your attendance, and we look forward to a very good session here this evening. Thank you, Sanjeev.
Thank you, Party Chairman, the Honorable Marvin Gonzalez, for bringing these opening remarks and really bringing context to this discussion on Stand Your Ground legislation, which is very serious and which impacts each and every citizen in Trinidad and Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, we move along now to the other aspect and the other phase of our consultation here, which is we go into the panel, and from there we will have a presentation by Mr. Larry Lala, Senior Counsel. So I would like to now invite the panel, to our esteemed panel, to take their seat, and I will call them out and introduce them one by one. All right, so firstly, of course, Mr. Larry Lala, Senior Counsel, and it is my pleasure to invite Mr. Lala, a distinguished legal mind and very respected voice at the bar with decades of experience in constitutional and public law. He has consistently championed the rule of law and justice in society. So we welcome Mr. Lala. Our senator, our next panelist, is in fact an attorney at law with a career focusing on criminal law, but spanning civil and family law as well. She is a dedicated legal practitioner who combines academic excellence with practical expertise, holding a master's degree in corporate and commercial law with a distinction. Beyond her practice, she is also a trained mediator, having brought her skills to important institutions such as the Judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago and the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. Her breadth of experience and commitment to justice make her a valuable voice on this panel. Please join me in welcoming Senator the Honorable Janelle John Bates. Ladies and gentlemen, we also have, of course, we cannot have a panel simply full of attorneys. We need another perspective. So we are joined by a well-respected psychologist whose work has focused on social behavior, community safety, and mental health implications of crime and justice. His expertise will help us better understand the human and social dimensions of this Stand Your Ground debate, particularly how such laws impact families, communities, and the psychology of safety. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Sule Joseph. And we do have another panelist who will join us very shortly, and I will introduce him when he comes. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we move forward, we have a presentation which would hopefully enlighten you a little, bring you some information on this Stand Your Ground law, and most of all, hopefully be able to stir some questions, some comments, and some thoughts on your part, those of you here and those of you viewing and listening virtually. So without further delay, allow me to welcome Larry Lala, Senior Counsel, to give a presentation on Stand Your Ground legislation.
Thank you very much, Viyash. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to adopt and stand upon the very distinguished protocol list that has been established by our chairman, just so that we could move very quickly into the presentations and get to the discussion. So for those of you who were tuned in the last time, and to those of you who are new to the discussion, let me start off by just introducing briefly the whole issue of how our laws are established. Basically, there are two systems. One, the common law, that is the law we would have inherited from England, colonial days, and that has developed in the courts over the years. That is the common law. And then there is the system of statutory law, that is the law that our parliament would have passed since we have obtained independence. Why I'm introducing that? Because already in the common law, there is something comparable to Stand Your Ground legislation, and that is what is known as the Castle Doctrine. The Castle Doctrine allows individuals, it is a legal principle that allows individuals to use reasonable force, including deadly force, to defend themselves against an intruder in their home without a duty of retreat. This Castle Doctrine, as I said the last time, has been around a long time, as far back as the year 1604, bear in mind how long I'm speaking about. A judge in one case said, "A man's house is his castle. The house of everyone is to him his castle and fortress, and he used it as well as for his defense against injury and violence as for his repose. And if thieves come to a man's house to rob or murder, and the owner or his servants kill any of the thieves in defense of himself and his house, it is no felony, it is no wrong in law, and he shall lose nothing." So we have had this Castle Doctrine for a long time. The question that arises is, we having that for such a long time, do we really need any new laws to deal with this issue? Just to explain further, in the common law, under the Castle Doctrine, there's this whole issue of the degree of force that one is used to defend oneself. And I'm speaking about the common law for a bit before we get to the actual legislation, so that you will be able to be educated and compare one to the other as we as a country make a decision as to whether we want this new change, this new law that the government is going to propose. So under the common law, in relation to the degree of force that one is allowed to use to defend oneself, one's home, one's family, it is said that a person standing his ground in his home in defense of himself and his family, his guests, or his property was allowed to use such force as is proportionate and reasonable in the circumstances as he believed them to be. In other words, you are attacked in your home. You, the person attacked in your home, are allowed to use such force as is reasonable and proportionate to that attack as you believe that attack to be taking place. Then there's the issue of a duty of retreat. Before you use that force, do you have a duty to run away? At common law, the answer is no. At common law, there is no duty of retreat before using force, as long as the force used was reasonably justified in the circumstances as you believe them to be. Whether you could have retreated safely or not before you use force is one of the factors that the court will take into account in deciding whether your force was reasonable in the circumstances. So that is the common law. Let us look now at what the government is proposing to bring to the Parliament. And that is through the Home Invasion, Self-Defense and Defense of Property Bill 2025. And to help you to understand, to assimilate, we're going to put up some of the sections of the bill on the screen, which you will be able to see both here and those viewing us virtually. Available for anyone to read online. It's on the Attorney General's website. So you simply search for Trinidad Stand Your Ground Bill and you should be able to pull it up from the Attorney General's website. So we're moving on to describe who the bill categorizes as the person committing home invasion. Then we go to E, someone who enters a dwelling house and then forms the intention to commit a serious criminal offense, and F, while armed with a weapon, intimidates or uses or threatens the imminent use of force on any person within the dwelling house, whether or not injury occurs. Right, so just those are some of the circumstances under which a person would be categorized as a home invader for the purposes of the bill. Once a person is attacked, how can that person respond? Let us go to section 7. B, believes that his acts were necessary and reasonable in order to defend and protect himself or another person from the use or threat of force. And C, establishes that the defensive force used was proportionate to the threat he honestly believed existed. Then, very importantly, and this is something I'll come back to in a bit, but I'll touch on it now. If you respond with force to an attack, the factors that a court, bear those words in mind, that a court would use to determine if the force used was proper, that is found at section 7.2, which reads, when determining whether the defensive force used was reasonable in the circumstances, the court shall take into account, I'll go through some of them, A, the nature of the force or threat, B, the extent to which the use of force was imminent, and whether there were other means available to respond to the potential use of force, C, the occupant's role in the incident, D, whether any party to the incident used or threatened to use a weapon, firearm, or explosive device, E, the size, age, gender, and physical capabilities of the parties to the incident. Let's jump down to I, the nature and proportionality of the occupant's response to the use of force. Let's jump down to K, whether there was a possibility that the occupant could have safely retreated, notwithstanding the fact that there was no duty to retreat. All of this sounds very similar to the common law that I went through with you earlier. A very important section is section 10. We have section 10 up yet? No? Section 10? You can't get it up? All right. Section 10 very importantly says, and this is a change that the bill would make to the common law, very important, says that the defense of stand your ground does not apply, among other things, where the degree of force used by an occupant is grossly disproportionate in the circumstances. Let me explain something. You would have heard me say that at common law, you are allowed, in defending yourself from a deadly attack, to use force which was reasonable and proportionate in the circumstances. Here, a change is being made to allow people to use a bit more force. So, you could use force that may be considered to be unreasonable or even disproportionate to the attack that you are faced with, as long as section 10 B, as long as the force that you use is not grossly disproportionate. All right? It's a little nuanced, but I'm hoping that I'm explaining it clearly to you to show the difference that the bill will make to the common law. Right? So criminal offense known as home invasion, and the bill, if passed into law, would now change that. So, having dealt with the common law, having dealt with sections of the bill, having dealt with important changes being brought by the bill, I come to a very important topic, and that is the shortcomings of the bill. And this is a point I made at the last public consultation in Port of Spain, and I drew some fire from the other side. But it's a very important point. Under the bill that is being proposed, and again I make the point, I'm not sure that the public properly understands from the consultations coming from the other side or conducted by the other side. Under the bill as proposed, even if you reasonably stood your ground and you use force which was not disproportionate to the circumstances you face, you still run the risk of being arrested for a very in court and say, Judge, I stood my ground. People are understanding or have understood that even with the new bill, they could face a serious amount of time in jail before they could establish their defense. And having said that, I want to emphasize the point that I made by playing the first video. Can we have the first video to highlight something that was said at one of the consultations conducted by the government?
And we expect to see legislative changes to the Firearms Act. Because when this bill comes in line, the stand your ground legislation, people may want to get a firearm. Presently, as it stands, there's a backlog of 35,000 firearms applications. People will have, and there's 9 people or 10 people working in the firearms unit at the police station. The system is not digitized, so people have to wait a long time, sometimes years. If I use a licensed firearm and shoot somebody who enters my house, I have to wait probably 2 years for the police to return it to me. What will happen to me in that 2 years? There are a lot of issues to be addressed with this. Also, the cost of a firearm is $10,000 and more. Will the government consider reducing the price of firearms for people who want to use it? Or raising the taxes on it to raise revenue? Thanks very much.
Listen to the response.
I'll answer one of your questions directly with an indirect response. That's the one that you ask about 2 years in terms of getting back your firearm. I think what the gentleman is alluding to is that currently, if you use your firearm, you discharge your firearm against a person, and then the matter goes to the police for an investigation, they normally take the firearm away from the user until the completion of the investigation. The effect of the law as being proposed right now is this. We are allowing persons to use a particular type of force against a home invader. So once prima facie that can be made out that the person is a home invader, a lawful firearm was used and so on, there may not even necessitate an investigation because now you're clothing the home user.
This is the Minister of Legal Affairs in this country saying that under the legislation, not that there may not be a charge, you know, there may not be an investigation, right? In my 29 going on 30 years of practicing law, I have never heard such a thing, right? The police will have to investigate. So the last time, and I made the point that the public was probably being misled about the consequences under the bill. That same Minister of Legal Affairs was approached outside the Parliament, and he made very derogatory remarks about me personally, which I wouldn't go into, and I wouldn't make any personal attacks on him, because as far as I'm concerned, you, the public, are not assisted in the educational process that we are engaged in by me getting involved in any personal attacks on anybody. But when he was approached outside the Parliament and he was asked by the reporter, well, Mr. Lala is saying that under the legislation, people could still be charged when they stand their ground, etc. What do you have to say to that? And here's what he said. Could we run the second video, please?
If he examines clause 7 and 8 of the bill, and then compares that with the existing common law, which is the current law, you will see that he's absolutely wrong in his comments and his statements. So it's...
All right. Could we pull up on the screen? He said 7 and 8, right? Let's go to section 7.2. If you could put up section 7 again for me, please. Look at section 7.2. And we will get back to a point I made earlier. When determining whether the defensive force used was reasonable in the circumstances, what are the next 2 words? The court shall take into account. How will you get before the court unless you are arrested and charged? So to make my point about the public being misled, I don't have to make any personal attacks. And I will ask the Minister of Legal Affairs to have some grace and learn how to conduct yourself properly. So there we see quite clearly that in this bill, there is jail for persons standing their ground. And you will have to wait until your time arrives to show the court that you have a defense under the legislation. I'm not saying that that would happen in every case. In some circumstances, there will be a clear case that someone properly stood his ground. And not that there wouldn't be an investigation, there will always be a police investigation. But after that investigation, in a clear case, which as my colleague will explain to you, that is something exceptional. That happens rarely, but there would be clear cases. But more often than not, someone will be charged. Because when it comes to the law and facts, things are rarely clear until you get to court. All right, so those are the points I wanted to make in my presentation, and I thank you for your kind attention. I'll be happy to entertain and try to answer your questions as we move along. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senior Counsel Larry Lala. And ladies and gentlemen, certainly very enlightening, always informative, and gives us a lot to think about. So thank you, Larry, for that presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, we get into our panel discussion, and I would like to welcome our final panelists. We welcome an attorney at law and deputy political leader of the People's National Movement, a dedicated servant of the people, advocate for progressive policies. He brings both legal expertise and a deep understanding of governance to the table. His perspective on how this legislation intersects with national priorities and the lived realities of citizens will be invaluable and bring insight into this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Deputy Political Leader of the People's National Movement, Mr. Sanjeev Budu. Welcome, Sanjeev. And ladies and gentlemen, we go into a brief panel discussion at this point in time, and where I will engage members of the panel and elicit their views on stand your ground legislation. And we will start with our newest member to our panel, our addition here in Chaguanas, Senator Janelle John Bates. And Senator, you would have spent some time and you bring unique experience through the office of the DPP. And we heard Larry say basically that in this bill, there's jail if you stand your ground. So I would like to find out from you, what are your initial thoughts and comments and perspective on that, especially given your experience?
Good evening. All right, it seems to be working. Good evening, everyone. I would like to say that I agree with the sentiments expressed by Senior Counsel in that it's not immediately if you stand your ground, it's not that if you stand your ground, you are scot-free. Load up the matic, shoot them, and that's it. It is not that. Especially if you follow that advice and someone actually dies. Senior Counsel is very correct in saying that there must be an investigation, And in my years at the DPP's office, what I find is that they actually go to the DPP for advice. And the DPP would advise them using a two-stage test. Is there sufficient evidence to bring the person before a jury to make a decision? And is it in the public interest to do so? So, stand your ground doesn't mean you're scot-free. Because unlike in other jurisdictions, what this act does not have is what is called immunity hearings. In other jurisdictions, if you stand your ground, you don't have to wait until your day in court to then bring up this defense. You actually have a hearing very early on where you can make your claim for self-defense. And if the finders of fact in that situation agree with you, then you will be free. We do not have immunity hearings in this act. So while well-intentioned, perhaps to bring this act, I think the intention of it is not clearly expressed by the government.
Thank you very much. And I want to bring into the conversation here Sule as well. There's a very important matter. At the last consultation in Port of Spain, we looked at many different angles and how this bill could be applied. But one important angle is that of domestic situations, family situations. You have situations where families are living in homes, you may have disputes, you may even have a visitor in a home that is a family member. Given your experience as a psychologist and understanding some of these issues, what is your perspective on that and how does it apply to stand your ground laws?
I feel like I got the hardest question first, but all right. In the last consultation, and I'll say it again, as a society, Trinbagonians, people, I'm not sure that we are very emotionally mature. All right, we tend to be emotionally volatile people, so we swing with the extreme. So when we are happy, we are very happy. In that moment of happiness, nothing else matters. We focus on being happy. When we are angry, in that moment of anger, nothing else matters. You're real angry in that moment. All right. So if in anger, the first thing that comes to your mind is loading up matics and emptying the clip and busting people's head and so on, you stand a very high chance of actioning that in the moment of anger because you're caught up in that emotion, right? Just to bring that to the act and to relatives. One of the things I find interesting in the act is that the act does not make, as far as I could see, any reference specific to firearms. It doesn't say specifically that standing your ground has to be with a firearm, right? And I find that interesting because with potential conflicts, we have conflicts often between family members, right? People fighting over who the house belongs to, who the house was left to, who the land was left to, that sort of thing. I can foresee persons both claiming residency of a property and utilizing this particular act or their thoughts on the act or what they're being told about the act, that they are free to open up themselves and attack the other person to offload, right? Bust the head, load up the matic and empty the clip, knock it on them again and again, right? Because there's this act, I'm concerned that this act may provide to the population a false sense of security and a false sense that enables certain actions and behaviors and reinforces it. So it says to me, if I feel as though I have a claim to this particular land, whether you name granny, auntie, tanty, cousin, uncle, whomever, if we get into a tiff and I stand in my ground, all hell break loose. So I do have legitimate concerns about that.
Thank you very much, Sule. And Sanjeev, I would like to bring you into the conversation on the same topic, maybe from your perspective, the legal perspective as well. How does family relations or even situations where a family member is visiting and there's an issue, and how does this law treat with matters like that?
I think, first of all, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Viash, for the question. I think the first point to note is that we come right back to senior counsel's position. All right, you have the situation of saying to the public, there'll be no investigation. But think about the absence of an investigation in that situation that you gave there. Think about two family members, one of whom is asked to leave, you're no longer an invitee. You don't reside here, you reside elsewhere. You're here at a family function, and things go south over a game of all fours, and you are asked to leave. You are no longer an invitee at that premises, and the owner of the premises, or the occupier, as the Act contemplates, decides to take what he finds to be a stand-your-ground position consistent with this legislation. And the government is saying to that person, well, look, there's not going to be an investigation here, because prima facie you could say this person is no longer an invitee to my home, he's therefore an intruder. I've asked him to leave, he's refusing to leave, and therefore I have taken my licensed firearm and shot him. I mean, that is absolute chaos, and that's the thing about this piece of legislation, and I keep asking the question, what exactly does this, what problem does this legislation address? What problem is it fixing? While I accept that the legislation introduces a new offense of home invasion, I have not yet heard of any person breaking into another person's home and being caught by the police, and the police saying there is no charge exists in law. That has never been the case. That's never been reported anywhere. So even the introduction of the crime of home invasion is not novel, it is not new, it is not that if you break into somebody's home and it is unlawful, you're not going to be charged. So that is the main question I think we should be asking ourselves. What exactly is this piece of legislation? What is the problem you're trying to fix, or what is the problem you anticipate that is going to need fixing?
Thank you, Sanjeev. And
if I may, right?
Sure, Sule.
There's a Sanjeev raised something that's interesting, and there's a portion under 7.2, right, that speaks to it being unlawful. You can't lawfully use this this act as a defense for standing your ground and shooting somebody if they have mental health challenges, right? Now, that first of all negates, it needs to be investigated if a person has a mental health challenge. So if you have somebody who you deem as a crazy person, I don't like the term crazy, but let's use it for this, from your village, from your area, you have a relative who's suffering mental health, dementia, anything of such a nature, right? Even depression, which is prevalent, depression and so on or whatever. That the Act specifically talks about that the person must not be suffering with any mental disorders under 7.2. And so, if that needs to be investigated, if the person was in the sane mind when they were on your property, that matter needs to be investigated. And while that is investigated, as a therapist, I can tell you that the court will reach out. It takes a process. When the court reaches out to do the assessments and so on, to see if this person is within their right frame and so on or whatever, that takes a period. Now, while all of this is going on, you'd be under arrest, right? I am assuming the police would come, take you, they're investigating, you'll have your firearm, we'd be doing an assessment. That assessment like this, for me, would take at least a week to have done, and then a week to write it. That is 2 weeks alone by the psychologist, the therapist. I don't know how long other aspects of the investigation will take place, but I can tell you on my end alone is 2 weeks. So 2 weeks you will be in custody while I am doing my part of the investigation. I can't speak to the other aspects of that investigation. So Lord alone knows how long before you go back to court and have to face your day. And you may be very well right within your rights to have done so. But I want to reiterate that I have again a concern that there is a belief, or at least the population have been told, that they can easily load up the matic and release and shoot persons, and they don't have to worry about the consequences of being arrested.
Thank you, Sule. And Larry, I know you wanted to make a comment.
I just wanted to touch on something that Sanjeev raised. Is the legislation trying to fix, have a safe society in which to live. And of course, a very important elements in that is having the police do their job effectively and having the proper social to ensure that people are not tempted to turn to a life of crime. But I read the report. There is a report of the Law Commission which accompanies the bill, and this is also available on the the Attorney General's website for those who would like to look at it. I read the report and there was something very concerning in the report in relation to Sanjeev's concern about the problem that it's trying to fix. And I just want to read one paragraph from that report with your permission, Mr. Chairman. Paragraph 2.5 of that report reads as follows. The Commission, that is the Law Commission, the Commission notes that some have linked two government proposals, namely enabling more applicants to be granted firearm users licenses, FULs, in accordance with the provisions of the Firearms Act, Chapter 1601, and the introduction of stand your ground legislation. From these two proposals, it can be deduced that an increased number of people will likely be applying for FULs in order to protect themselves, others, and their property from home invaders. Although the grant of FULs and the use of firearms are not the focus of this paper, the Commission acknowledges the connection between these two proposals and supports suggested measures such as extensive mandatory training for FUL holders, recertification, limiting the number of firearms per FUL holder, and the inspection of dwelling houses to ensure proper storage of firearms. The point that is being made is that there is societal re-engineering intended by both this legislation and the FUL legislation. They are meant to work hand in hand with each other to have more persons armed in our country so that they could use this legislation in their defense. The question is, and it's a question the population will have to answer, is that where we want our society to go? So the legislation was imported from the United States principally, and we all know that or most of us should know that in the United States, in their constitution, they have their Second Amendment, which gives the citizens of the United States a right to bear arms. So that's a different type of society. To highlight how different that society is, those of us who are following the news would understand that as of yesterday, I believe, in the state of Florida, you could do what they call open carry. If you are an FUL holder, you could walk around like in the days of the Wild Wild West with your gun and your literally in your waist and show everybody that you have a firearm. Trinidad and Tobago, is that where we want to go? I can't answer that question. The population will have to answer that question as we move along.
Thank you, Larry. And sticking with that point to Senator John Bates, in the short run, this legislation, it's already before the Parliament. One would assume it is to be debated sooner or later. Assuming this bill is passed and it becomes law, without the requisite changes in firearm regulations or allowing easy access to firearms, in the short run, who stands to benefit from a law like this, and what is the impact in a circumstance where there isn't a proliferation of firearms or legal firearms, but a law like this is in place?
You're asking me a question a bit outside of my ambit. You're asking me who stands to benefit from this. Well, this Stand Your Ground Act doesn't specifically speak to only use of firearms to defend yourself. So even if there are no change in the FUL and other regulations, they're saying you can stand your ground with whatever you have at hand. A cutlass, as somebody say, people apparently have cutlass under their bed and at the side of their door, wherever 2x4 you have, the belted beat the children. So you're not relegated to only using a firearm. But in terms of who stands to benefit, if this law is passed and everybody now looking for a firearm, which I heard on the screen is 10,000 and up, I leave it to you to figure out who will benefit from everybody lining up to buy a firearm now.
Thank you, Senator. And again, this is a very interesting point raised by Larry, and I want to bring it to you, Sule. We have a society, and Larry raised the issue of societal re-engineering, likening it to the US society where there's a culture of right to bear arms. What's your perspective on that?
My perspective on the culture to the
On the potential of a proliferation of firearms, a society where legal firearms is or becomes part of the culture.
Okay, because I was going to say perhaps based on reports, there may be already a proliferation of firearms. There's the legal ones though we discussing, right? Okay. I want to say as a professional, I'm in the mental health sphere, I have concerns, and I keep reiterating that I have concerns. Again, my concerns are based on us as a people, our culture. I like using, for example, our driving culture. Anybody here ever got a bad drive? Right? Anybody get a bad drive? Right, good, nice. I'm certain when you got that bad drive, you were smiling and you thanked the person very nicely for the bad drive they give you, and you left feeling happy, right? You hugged the person and taking your mind and you went, right? Okay, good. None of us ever thought about jumping out your car and running upside the person's head for the bad drive. None of us. May that as it be, right? Or might that as it be, I would argue that there may be one or two of us, maybe more than that, who get exceptionally angry in the moment, right? And if you had the opportunity to put down your window and give this person a piece of your mind and a few choice words as to the situation and how you feel about the situation that they put you in, your children and your grandchildren, your spouse, your whoever, that we may do that. Could you imagine if you could do that with a firearm on your person? Could you imagine that the person who cut you off in traffic and jump out to give you a piece of your mind, or the person who jump out of their vehicle to assault your vehicle, also had a firearm? How do we at first, as a people, I think we need to address the culture of how do we moderate our emotions and our emotional intelligence. All right? We need to moderate that. We as a people, we need to see things like somebody comes to you with facts and your response is to, as a leader, is to attack the person's personality and character as opposed to treating with the facts, right, on the news. When we move away from that type of functioning and we can say, okay, this person came to me with the facts, I disagree and this is why, and we don't make it a personal attack, right? We stick to the facts and we could be emotionally mature, then perhaps we could start talking about putting firearms and having weapons more easily and readily at our disposal. Until then, we are still very much at the mercy of our emotions and whatever weapons we have closest at hand. I can't see how, as a people and as a society, providing us with weapons that can cause, I want to say mass destruction, right? Weapons that can cause casualty and mass destruction, and equipping everyone or more people with that, I can't see how that makes things better. Yeah, we already have issues with assessing everybody. We have a lot of people walking around here with mental health issues, all in part. Sorry, let me not say that. But we have people with mental health issues. We have people with mental health issues all around us, and we don't assess that correctly. Could we imagine giving them firearms? I think we need to work on that first. Yeah.
Thank you, Sule. And Sanjeev, I know you have a perspective here as well.
Yeah, I'd just like to weigh in. The conversation is taking a very interesting turn, and I thought I would point out some facts here. So, Larry rightfully pointed out that a lot of this legislation is based upon the Florida model of the standing ground. And and it's really interesting that Sule just concluded in talking about moderating behavioral intelligence as a society, and perhaps then considering whether you want to give out guns. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence came about and the United States became an independent nation. In 1791, the Second Amendment took force, which gave citizens the right to bear arms. That was 15 years after the United States became the United States. In 2005, that is 214 years later, that is when the first stand your ground legislation was introduced in Florida. 214 years after citizens were given the right to bear arms, it took them 214 years in one state to decide we're going to take away your obligation to retreat. And so when you compare that with the 63 years of our democracy, of our independence, it really begs the question as to how is it so easy to compare societies without taking these things into consideration. And I will be the first to say that those with different views will respond to what I have just said by saying, well, people lived in Trinidad before 1962. I would like to point out people also lived in the United States, or what became the United States before 1776. So that argument simply is really useless. So I just wanted to chime in with that, just to put some perspective on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjeev. And we'll close off this panel discussion here with Senator John Bates having the last word.
A thought came to me when Sule was speaking about the cultural perspective about this act. To put it plainly, there were ethnic concerns. Who would be using it against whom? Again, this ties into what Sule says, how we are quick to anger in the society. That at the last consultation, I don't want to be an answer. Those who can live in gated communities and those who don't. Again, that was in the society. Will we be quick to use the gun first, empty the matic first, anti-justice? So many questions arises.
The consultation, and we now enter into the segment where we get into a discussion with you, the members of the audience, live on social media, on YouTube, on Facebook, and I will go through some of the ground rules. So we have a structured approach to this. So we ask persons to just line up in an orderly manner, at least at the middle. We ask that you keep your question or comment within our stand your ground legislation. It could be very direct in the question. And we are also asking that instead of going through the protocols, just simply state, I stand on station and in our discourse. We may disagree, or they would agree, I will do so. So ladies and gentlemen, an informative discussion with our esteemed and informed panel here today. So please, the mic is yours. I ask before that you just give your name and your constituency.
Good night, everyone. My name is Chrissie. This is my second consultation visit. And from what I heard, I keep with the repercussion of having the matic. For me, if I had an opportunity to vote, I would vote on having the matic as a businesswoman, because these fellas, when I understand Sanji say that when they have to be, when they are held, the police will do their job. But I haven't heard nobody saying before the police hold them when they're looking to come in my place. I mean, I just still look good, I could get raped. And they come in and they're raping you. What do I do then? And there is where I would like to have the matic to protect myself and my family.
Sanjeev?
Thank you, good evening, Yanet. So, Larry read from a document entitled Protection Against Home Invasion in Trinidad and Tobago, an Examination of Stand Your Ground and Other Self-Defense Laws, authored by the Law Reform Commission of Trinidad and Tobago, July 2025. This is the covering document to the draft of the bill that the government intends to put before the Parliament. And he read specifically from paragraph 2.5 of that document. But there is a footnote just about midway through. And that footnote reads something topical to the question, I think, Yanet. And it reads as follows. there have been a few erroneous mentions of citizens' rights to have and use firearms in Trinidad and Tobago. It should be noted that unlike the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution, which protects the right of individuals in America to keep and bear arms, no such right is enshrined under the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago or provided for in any domestic legislation. Which takes us right back to the question, or at least takes me right back to the question I was asking in the beginning. What is the problem that exists that this particular piece of legislation is fixing? Because what it says in black and white is not what they have said it says. The messaging that introduces this bill to the public addresses a series of issues, all of which we agree with. We agree that crime is an issue for us all and it has to be addressed. And I've said before and I'll say it again, I will support any moves to address and curtail the spread of violent crime in Trinidad and Tobago, regardless of of which government would introduce those measures. But we have to ensure that insofar as legislation is being put to Parliament and to become law, that it solves up, it really and tangibly addresses an issue. Because it is being messaged and packaged in a particular way that it simply does not read in black and white. But I have a little diagram on my notes here, in just making my own notes, and it asks the same question you are asking. And it's the question number 3 on my paper. It says, what problem is this fixing, question mark? There are 2 categories of people, those with firearms, those without firearms. Those with firearms, there's already self-defense laws that protect you. And to support that, I would suggest cast your minds back to the most recent 5 shootings that involved the owners of legal firearms, and ask yourself, of those last 5, how many of them were arrested and charged with any crime? And the other category of people, no firearm. Well, you're still not protected by this legislation, are you? That's the point you made. So which of these 2 categories this bill is assisting?
To add to that, Chantif, right? Your concern, Yolette, is a sobering one and a very real one. But the fact that you have that concern in the first place speaks to an element of lack in an area of protection. What you are saying is that you feel the need to protect yourself because the agencies that are designed to protect you, you're clearly not feeling as though they're doing that. Which suggests that needs addressing, not necessarily putting a firearm in your hand. We need to address the systems that failing. Because you can have a firearm in your hand and that still happens. Right? It says to me what happens, the messaging, again, as Sanjeev said, I have an issue, the messaging creates within you a false sense of security, that having this firearm will make you feel safe. It also throws and thrusts upon you, the citizenry, your own responsibility for your security, when there's a system that's supposed to be in place to do that. So then we're taking away the responsibility of the police and so on from protecting and serving us, and now we protect and serve ourselves. Something wrong with that system.
Thank you, Sule. We have another question here.
Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening to you all protocols observed. Before Mr. Sule intervened, I felt I would not have been able to say my piece. Because the question that I've been asking all of the time is, why do we need this legislation? Which is the question I put to you. You see, I was still in town when there was a Garvin-Scott drug report on the police service. And I was still there when Pastor Dutton did the commission of inquiry when Rodwell Murray made the revelation about the police service. I was there when Mr. Pandy was living in rage, when Ramdani escaped and there was another commission of inquiry. I was there when Ellis Clark and Ramesh Deriswara got together to write new rules for the police service. And I was there when Dr. Deriswara, only recently, wrote the manpower report for the police service. And the question I put to you on this panel this evening, why is it that legislators in this country, except the PNM, have blocked to ensure that we have integrity within our armed services, which is their responsibility in a democracy. If I didn't say my name is Eric Esther. Right. So the question that the country has to ask itself, why is it that the government of the day has decided to give me 007 status so that I am licensed to kill? Why is it they decided that I must be my own policeman? Why? And is that what we really and truly want? So at the end of the day, I say to you, we need to fix our security services. We need to ensure that we have an ample security response, because the present Prime Minister is on record in the 2023 debate as naming Trinidad and Tobago as a narco state. So she has knowledge which many of you perhaps don't have. And the fact is that once it is the state is vulnerable to this extent, all this time, that's not going to help you. It's not going to help you. Recently, the Commissioner of Police told me he had 55,000 applications for firearms. 55,000! I don't know, it perhaps 100,000 right now. And we have to ask ourselves if this is the society that we want. So at the end of the day, I would support the PNM advocating to fix our security services, ensure that we have persons of integrity doing the job they're supposed to do, make those things right, and don't forget social services, because the government, and when I say government, I speak of governments. We have been guilty of one particular crime. You see, there are persons in the society who will only be able to work for the state, and we have to accept that. We probably have to get them to work a little harder. And we cannot take the economy away from them, put it on to others who already have, and expect the society to function normally. That's not going to happen. Example, you give a man a big contract to build a road. He decided to hire who he wanted to hire. He didn't hire John, Amos, Bernard, nobody like that. He hired who he wanted to hire. And at the end of the day, John, Amos, and Bernard, they can't pay the electricity bill, they can't pay the agency bill, they can't buy books for the children. We have to decide how we run this economy, because a social aspect is critical in everything that we do. So I just want to make it clear. We fix the security services, social compact, those things. But when you try to tell me that we need a stand your ground law so that I must be licensed to kill, something else is happening. I'm going to Chaguanas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Esdell. Certainly raising some very pertinent points, and I just open it up to the panel. If anyone cares to address some of the issues, we looked at, he spoke of root causes, he spoke of potential solutions to crime, and maybe in the past, the current government, maybe when in opposition, not supporting key pieces of legislation and not supporting initiatives.
Yeah, it was good to put a face to the voice. But the gentleman raised a very important point. Do we really want to replace the police service with an armed population? And that is where we're heading. That's the point I made earlier, with the link between the stand your ground legislation and the FUL legislation. And it is not an imaginary link, it's a link that even the Law Commission has already drawn. And the question that arises for discussion, which is something that as a population we need to confront. Do we really want to go there as a society? In this Caribbean sea that we occupy, I don't think there's any island that conducts its affairs that way. We are small societies. And do we want to have a heavily armed society that competes with the police service for space? Or should we focus on fixing the problems we have with our police service so that they could properly police the society? It's something that we have to ask ourselves.
Thank you, Larry. And just coming out of that comment as well to Senator John Bates, I might ask. Mr. Ezra raised the issue of social services and looking at our economy, and I think what he was speaking to is root causes of crime and a holistic approach to fighting crime. Do you care to comment on a point like that?
I think it's a critical point for consideration. It's very much like this whole concept of putting police in schools. We seem to be trying to address the symptoms without addressing the illness, you know? So I think this whole approach to crime is not about, or home invasion, let's use that, it's not about just having a piece of legislation, because yes, we have this legislation, but the first question is how many of us can get guns? And as a woman, do I even, because that whole point that was raised earlier about the prospect of being raped, that has been ringing in my head since it was stated. Do I want to test this stand your ground legislation in that situation? Do I even want to be faced with 3 or 4 men in my house and then scrambling to find a gun to protect myself? No. I want us to get to the root causes of these issues. What drives people to crime in the first place? I want us to have more police patrolling, and to me that is something that would be a deterrent to some people even breaking in your home. I want us to address the justice system, making sure that it's running more efficiently so that criminals know that when they commit a crime, it's not that they're going to get bail and be out in the streets for years and years and years running up and down doing whatever. No, they know it in quick order. They will be prosecuted and hopefully jailed for their crime. So I think we need to really start looking at this whole home invasion and crime generally in a holistic manner. It's not just about having law. We need to have efficient systems in place.
Thank you, Senator. And we have another question here. Name and constituency.
Starting on the existing protocols, good evening everyone, Jovan Roberts, Malawa Mausika. One of the criticisms of the existing common law is that how does one measure proportionality? So for example, if you come to slap me, I will break your hand. Or at least I'll try. To me that is reasonable and proportionate. To the person with a broken hand it is not. So it will then have to be ventilated in court and we determine who was right and who was wrong, or if the law was adhered to or not. So to Sanjay, to your point, that could be what we are trying to address in saying, well, now you're allowed to use slightly disproportionate force. The problem I am anticipating is, if you tell me now that I can use disproportionate force and you try to slap me, now I want to put a cocktail on you. I want to put you in the hospital because I'm permitted to, right? So I'm saying that to ask this question: how does one reasonably measure disproportionate force? Thank you.
Okay. Larry?
Yeah, and that is the issue that's going to get a lot of people arrested and charged and have to look for bail if they get bail. And will have to wait for years in custody awaiting trial, because the same issue you are asking is the same issue that will confront the police in the investigation that they will conduct, and it's the same issue that the DPP will be concerned about when the police go to him for advice. So it is a very, very difficult issue to grapple with. And the point that I made the last time, and it was made here again this evening, is that it is unfair to the population to bring law like that and not have inserted in the law the immunity provisions that would allow someone, if they are charged, to force the police to bring the matter before a judge within a short space of time so that they could place the onus on the police to show that they acted disproportionately. And if the police cannot do that, then they have to be freed early. So in a way, if this bill goes to the parliament like that, like this, and is passed, the government will be setting up the population, because they tell you could stand your ground, but when you are arrested and charged, there is no immunity in the provision, there is no immunity provision in the bill to ensure that at an early stage you could have a chance of walking free if you acted properly under the legislation. So it's a very, very valid concern that you raised.
Thank you, Larry. And again, we have another question here.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Adam Hussein. So one of the concerns I realized that were not picked up from the panel is the issue of owning a licensed firearm, is the fact that it makes you a target to the criminal element. Right. So I know a lot of instances, retired police officers, security guards, right within the area here, they have been targeted just because the sole purpose they own a firearm. They were assaulted, the firearm was taken away, nothing else was taken away, just the firearm. They were left with all the cash, all the cards, everything else. And this is a serious issue of owning something like that, having it in your home. So we have to be cognizant of that fact, and we have to also know that not every home might have a strong able-bodied man or a strong able-bodied woman for that case. We might have the elderly, we'll have kids. So in situations like even a home invasion, which is the purpose and intent we thought the law is for, if there's a firearm there, this makes them a very easy target and could even cause that family more distress.
Thank you, Senator. And I see Larry wanted to comment as well.
I wanted to say that that's a very important point, making you a target, and it also raises two other issues that I thought about connected to that. If the home invaders now have this idea that everybody has a firearm and ready to shoot, they may now be coming with a different mentality, and they may be coming with more force. We still have the instances where people would break in your home. They might just have a knife, or they might not even be armed. But now, if in my mind everybody ready to empty the clip, they will come ready to empty the clip first. And then the second thing that was tied into that was the concept of retaliation. I heard that mentioned by someone in another space, and I thought it was a good point. Somebody break into your home, you empty the clip on them, they run away, they're not caught by the police. As the person said, these people will swing back, They might return now. And that is another concern I have that can arise out of this piece of legislation.
Thank you, Senator. Larry?
Yeah, I mean, if the criminal element know that people are more heavily armed, they're not going to be deterred from doing what they want to do. They're going to come to do it with more force. So the answer cannot be to have a more heavily armed society, because that doesn't address the fundamentals of the problem. We have to address the fundamentals of the problem if we are to deal with crime, not by ramping up violence in the society. My respectful view.
Thank you, Larry. And Sanjeev?
Thank you. I'll try to be quick. Thank you. That brings us right back to that keyword, problem. Because criminals, in my view, are problem solvers, Their problem is they would like to take money from you. That's the problem they have. They want money, and they find you could potentially solve that problem. So if it is that in their problem solving way of thinking, they encounter a sub-part of that problem, which is you having a firearm, they're simply going to adjust their problem solving skills to achieve what they set out to achieve. Now if you go back to the initial problem of them wanting money, wouldn't it be a sensible approach to create and sustain opportunities for the most vulnerable in society, for those who may not have opportunities in the private sector? And if you ask yourself that question, the answer is, well, yes, that seems like a potentially good solution to a problem some people have in society, then ask yourself, was it a good decision? And in keeping with an interest to reduce crime, to send home 50, 60,000 people in a month? We have to address what the problems are, as Larry said. And this begs the, it I think invites me, if I may take some liberty here, to go into whether arming society means necessarily a reduction in violent crime. And the very same paper I read from earlier had some points here, and I'll read from them. The intended deterrence effect was not proved. Individuals were found to be undeterred from committing crimes even though their victims had lethal means to defend themselves. Stand your ground laws contribute to vigilantism, escalated violence, and low-cost license to kill. Then we have here the 2022 study estimates that expanded legal protections for individuals who use deadly violence in self-defense result in an additional 700 homicides each year, an increase in monthly homicide rates of 11% nationally, but up to 28% in some states, and this is a study done in the United States. Now in 2024, Trinidad recorded 625 murders. A 28% increase would mean that we have 800 murders, or 175 more than we had before. And while that year's figures are quoted in this study here, what is not quoted in this study here is that between the years 2015 and 2024, robberies declined by 514 in Trinidad and Tobago, which equated to an 18% reduction. And the same period, 2015 to 2024, there was a reduction of 125 in the number of larceny dwelling house, which was recorded. That is a 53% reduction. So while we're looking at 2024 numbers in this report, and TTPS has now removed statistics from their website, there are no statistics published anymore, we have to consider, well, whether we are on a downward trajectory or not. Look, the truth is, any crime occurring in Trinidad is too much crime. But maybe, just maybe, for the last 10 years, addressing root causes did in fact have an impact on violent crimes, and particularly as it relates to what is being proposed to be termed as home invasions. Because the two categories of crime I spoke about is robberies, which includes robbery with violence and robbery with weapons, and larceny dwelling house, which means breaking into somebody's house. We had a decrease, as I said, of 53% between 2015 and 2024. So maybe when the former Minister of Finance introduced all those counselors in the schools in the last 10 years, maybe that was addressing root causes.
Thank you, Sanjeev. We'll take a question here.
Just quickly, I want to add as well, right?
Sure, sir.
The name of the bill, by the way, is the Home Invasion Bill. It's a home invasion bill. You catch the bandit outside, or the bandit catches you outside, you'll have to invite him home by you. You'll have to say, wait 1 minute, don't drop my head, please, come this way, right? And then shoot him in your yard. Or you shoot him in your home, as far as I understand the bill to be.
You get invitee and then no longer.
Well, then, yes, but when you invite him, he's no longer trespassing, right? So it defeats the whole purpose of the bill in the first place. So I just think they'd be cautious. So if we are pushing, we want the bill to be passed because you want to feel safe, then this is for you to feel safe home. But a lot of the robberies that happen outside the home, then what? Do you give the bandit your location and tell him, check me back in 2 hours or something, or, you know, how do we address that? That is not, as everybody else has said, address the root causes of crime in the first place. We need to be cautious.
Thank you very much. So we'll take a question here and then we'll go to one of our online questions.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, and all protocols observed. I have a question, but I'm going to make a statement, because for FUL users, there are over 40,000 FUL users in this nation. We have this home invasion law that the UNC wants to pass. Mr. Lala, I want to ask you this question because you're one of the people that could have some answers on this. Could this bill, could clauses be entered into this bill that brings down the temperature? Because there seems to be a lot of excitement because people think that there's only firearm you can defend yourself with. However, for FUL users, I would like if somebody come into my home 2 o'clock in the morning, they didn't come to play games. And I will do what I have to do. But the fact of the matter is, this excitement, and I heard you speak about the fundamental issues. Is there some way that in Parliament that this could be watered down to make people feel comfortable in this nation?
I doubt very much that that could be achieved, because the entire premise of the bill is allowing people to use more force than they could use now. So if, as you say, there's an effort to drop the temperature, well, dropping the temperature means just staying with what we have now, and that means no bill. So I doubt very much that that could be done. The whole purpose of the legislation is to allow persons to use a greater degree of force. That is, whereas at common law, the force that you're allowed to use must be reasonable and proportionate. Under the bill, which is the change that is being made, you're being allowed to use force which is disproportionate once it is not grossly disproportionate. All right, so fundamentally, the bill involves raising the temperature. That's as best as I could explain it.
What's the use that we have in all these consultations? I mean, we're not going to go anywhere. We got to do something. Maybe we need to have placards out in the streets and people marching or something.
Well, that is a little above my pay grade. So.
But we got to do something.
Yeah.
All we doing is discussing the issue. But I haven't heard anyone comes up with, say, well, okay, this idea would work, or that idea would work, or we're going to make this work. All we're doing is just giving us an example of what is, or what, offering vague platitudes. Why don't we have a particular answer or a consensus building so that therefore we could say, hey, we're doing something.
Okay, thank you. I think Sanjeev wishes to address that.
To me, we come right back to the question, what is the problem that this legislation is solving? And I said in the last consultation, I have a problem with this bill, I don't have any problem with this bill. My question is, why was it messaged to the population in the way it was? That is what is causing the temperature that you referred to. And I'll quote, the temperature that you referred to, sir, came from these words: load up your matic, light them up, empty the clip, and when you're done, knock it on them, knock it again, and then call my name. I am Kamla. Do not fear, Kamla. I say, those are the words that caused this bill to have that temperature, sir. Because the population was told, after you knock it again, call somebody name, Tell the police when they come to lock you up, say, brother, hold on just now. This bill says that I could do whatever I want in my house. Kamla. Call my name. That's why we have a temperature in this bill. So all my perspective, and this is mine, is that nothing is wrong with this bill, except that please do not telegraph, it is more than telegraphing, do not say to the public that you could shoot somebody in the back. Do not say to the public that even if a policeman comes in your house and you want to show he's a police, shoot him. Do not say inflammatory things to the population when you have drafted this bill and you know very well that it does very little more than codifying as a common law position and very little more than introducing into legislation an offense that is already covered in existing legislation. So I think it needs to be part of a suite of legislative reform that has already been started. And to my fellow panelist senator's point, that also includes reform in the judiciary. And you would recall that it was in the last two administrations of the PNM government between 2015 and 2025 that undertook the largest transformation of the judiciary alongside the Chief Justice, which included virtual courtrooms, which included the AJIPA legislation, and which has tangibly reduced the backlog in the criminal justice system.
Thank you. Sir, if you could just permit me to ask a question that was posed virtually. What's to stop this law from being used by people to settle personal scores or to justify actions that would never truly be in self-defense? Senator?
Well, Section 7(2) of the bill, so when the police arrests you and charges you and you're brought before the court, they examine factors listed A to N. And some of the factors include whether the parties, the history and interaction or communication between the parties to the incident. So people may try, I guess if they want, they can use it to settle a score, but just know there are factors that the court has to consider, and one of that is the history of the interaction and the communication. So if the court comes to understand that there was some sort of background bacchanal between the parties, it might color their decision. You have to consider whether or not the nature and proportionality of the occupier's response to the threat. They have to consider whether the occupant did what he honestly and instinctively thought was necessary for a legitimate purpose. So the court will take its time to examine all of the circumstances according to this act. And these are factors that the court already takes into consideration under the common law.
Thank you.
You know where that becomes a little scary? I think that it does not take, the act does not take into consideration that there are communities where a lot of illegal firearms exist. So you may be getting into a confrontation with a neighbor or somebody from your community where who you may hold a legitimate belief that this person is in possession of a weapon or a firearm, and you as a holder might say, listen, for my own safety and whatever, I will, I guess, load up my matic, right? It doesn't take into consideration that, because what the bill, as far as I see it here, if you continuously have this beef with your neighbor and so on, and the history and so on, you will have to be arrested and investigated. Not so, the police will have to investigate, as Senior Counsel was mentioning previously, investigated to see if there was intention to end this person's life from previous relationships before, the history you all had, that sort of thing. It does not, for me, give considerations to communities and some of the nuances that some of these communities and relationships in these communities may have.
Thank you, Sule. You have another question here?
Thank you very much. All protocols observed. Winston Zidane, Chaguanas West. I have so much concerns about this thing, it's no joke. I have to wonder, like many times this present government have hoodwinked this population, is this another attempt to do it again? And I say that and I ask that because of all that was previously said by the panel and others here, there are legislation already in place to deal with matters of this nature. What is the real purpose of this? Is it to issue a firearms license in a bigger way? Is it to make life harder for people like myself? I'm a pastor. I am often called into situations that are aggressive, violent, abusive, to bring calm and peace. Is this designed to make me stay awake? I not want to do my godly calling anymore? What is the whole purpose of it? I do not understand. So there is no amount of laws, somebody already said it, I think the Honorable Senator, that could legislate and dictate the heart of man. We will break it all the time. So I want to humbly submit to all those that are hearing, and my idea might be scoffed at and laughed at, but until we find a way to put the fear of God back into man, starting from childhood, no amount of laws and legislation and debates will change our society. We will keep getting worse. What stands before me is reminding me of an old western with Lee Van Cleef and Clint Eastwood. It's who could draw first. And it looks like that's the society we want to keep going down. Should we adopt this stand your ground legislation? As far as I am concerned, it is perfect trash and rubbish. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mahabir. Any comments on?
We come right back, Mr. Mahabir, to the root. This standing ground legislation is a demonstration of an intention to increase the number of firearm holders in Trinidad, legal gun owners, and whether that may cause, whether the spin-off of that is to create a gun culture and so on. Well, two things I'll say to that. One, we've had a change of administration, and with that, one would expect change in policy. All right, that comes with a change in government. But what we have not heard is what the government's position is on gun ownership. Whether there is in fact a drive to increase the number of people that own firearms, and if that was so, one would expect that consequent to that we would see reform of the firearms bill, perhaps to introduce a mix of police and I mean it was a campaign promise 25 when the now Prime Minister said, well, she didn't say that in any particular order, but the middle promise there comes first, home invasion laws, right? It comes in the form of something referred to casually as the stand your ground laws, but is it in fact named the Home Invasion, Self-Defense and Defense of Property Bill 2025. And then last there we see legal firearms. We will give you legal firearms. Well, if that's the case, perhaps before telling people load up the Matic, you should consider whether you're giving more people a Matic in the first place. So we do need some firearm reform. And again, I mean, I'm not trying to politicize things, all right? But the fact remains that the last government, as everybody knows, was conducting or had asked the police, and the police agreed to conduct an investigation into the firearms unit to determine an audit, as it were. That is what it would call, right? To determine a few things. Number one, what is the current criteria? How many applications are on the commissioner's desk? How many are granted? How many are rejected? How many go before the appeal? What is the performance of the appeal boards? All of those things were under review ostensibly to guide a responsible government as to how that process can be reformed, and that to me is a sensible approach, rather than to run off to the public and tell people about load up your Matic, and then this is the legislation that you have that says absolutely nothing of that sort.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Sir, name and constituency?
My name is Kenneth Butcher and I operate from Terrace, Salmon. I'm a little bit confused in terms of the stats that was given earlier on when you said that it seemed as though there was a downward trend in home invasions and robberies and so on. And then my own research shows that in Miami, when this law was introduced there 20 years ago to now, there's an increase in homicides using guns 24 to 31%. Yet you said that you are prepared to support this law. So I want to know how you could support this particular law. You don't have a problem with it. Yet the facts that you give and I research shows that there's a disparity in what's going on. There's an increase in terms of homicides since that law was passed in the United States. 24 to 31% increase. And then you also told me that it seems as though that there, from the research and the reports, that there was a downward trend. And so I'd like you to explain that.
Sure. So just to clarify, I refer to an increase, you were correct, and a decrease. The increase I refer to is what is reported in the Protection Against Home Invasion in Trinidad and Tobago paper, which is the cover of the bill, and it's found on the Attorney General's website. And it is what the government has invited the population to address its mind to before deciding whether they wish to consult on it or not. And this says that there was a 28% increase in some states when there are expanded legal protections for individuals who use deadly violence in self-defense, right? So there's an increase in deadly crimes when you have stand your ground and other types of legislation that are similar to stand your ground. The decrease I referred to is based on statistics from the TTPS, and it is for the period 2015 to 2024 in two categories of crime. One being robberies, which saw a decrease in those years of 18% over the period, and lastly dwelling house, which saw a decrease for the same period of 53%, right? So that what I am saying is, in Florida, for example, you have standing ground legislation, as I said, for the last 20 years, yet they have seen an increase in violent crime. In Trinidad, we have seen a decrease in two categories which addresses, one can extrapolate the question of home invasions, right? What is now called home invasions, because you have two offenses here, lastly dwelling house, and you have robberies. And I accept that the legislation introduces a new category, a new offense, which is home invasion, and there's an entire description as to what home invasion is. What I am saying as well, which are these are two separate issues, and the third you asked me about is why am I supporting this bill? It is not so that I am supporting this bill. I am saying that this bill can be useful if it is introduced as a part of a larger policy to address crime, but to announce it as a panacea for crime, which is the way it is being announced, is what I have an issue with. This is not going to solve crime, yet it is being presented to the population as a solution to crime, with which I have a difficulty. But had it been introduced after certain other legislative reforms that can address crime, after you've looked at root cause issues, which we've been looking at for the past 10 years and even before, after you've taken certain societal certain steps to correct and address societal ills, after you've done all of that, then perhaps this bill could be useful. And insofar as any legislation is being introduced with the intention of addressing crime, I will certainly consider giving it my support, because we have a crime problem in Trinidad and Tobago, which we must accept. But insofar as you're messaging this bill to say to us, here's the fix for crime, pick up a gun, shoot somebody, load up your matic, but you don't have the matic. We have firing people, 60,000 people. We are putting police in school. I mean, and as far as the actual conduct of the government is going in a different direction, I have a difficulty. So I hope that clarifies your question. I wonder if it does.
It certainly doesn't for me, because I'm getting mixed signals. And for the population outside there, I am hearing that you are prepared to support this. That's what I'm hearing. I want to hear definitely that you are not supporting this. It can't be a gray area that if you do this and if you do this and if you do this. I am not getting that, and I'm uneasy.
Well, so to be quite frank, this bill goes as far as to introduce a new category of crime in this country, a new offense of home invasion. I have no difficulty supporting the creation of a new offense of home invasion. What I have a difficulty with is the manner in which the piece of legislation is being introduced. That is what I have a difficulty with, and to that I will object.
Thank you.
Pleasant good afternoon to the head table. And I want to thank Mr. Butcher, because I was running scared and I thought everybody was looking at things the way I'm seeing it. So I want to paint a few pictures. There was one time where you have people who are tormenting the community, and I'm saying the Muslim group, some of them, and people after a while they get fed up, decide to defend themselves. So what they say out of chaos is have something. So what ended up happening is we get Rasta City. They decide to defend themselves. I'm a campaigner, I like to campaign. And I'm real scared looking at the bill, because again, with Rasta City and Muslim going in some area, you can't really go, some people can't go places and so on, they're scared. As a campaigner, I'm hearing Kamala saying if, and forgive me, I'm really mixed, but I represent a group in this community that I always talk about because I feel they're downtrodden. So if I sound some way, don't blame me. Kamala say, if all the Indians come out and vote, we would win. So, okay, why is she saying that? Because, I mean, across the board, everybody supports political parties. Right, you go down, and I'm hearing different conversation in different areas. Recently, I hear Wayne Sturge say, you could shoot them in the back when they leave in. As far as I know, it's only the prison officer could shoot somebody in the back. I don't know how anybody else could get away, even when you have a license firearm or not. A prison officer could shoot a prisoner if he ran away and so on. He could get away with that because the prisoner ran away. He break jail or whatever it is. I am thinking, if I was to go to a house campaigning, the gentleman don't want to see me. He see me coming, peeping. He said, nah, me want to see them. He stay inside. And after knocking a few times, I said, look, let me leave this man here because he really ain't thinking like leave and go in. And this man, out of mischief, come out and sound an alarm and say, thief, and shoot. Remember, you get the green light. The Minister of Defense said you could shoot them in the leaving. How are we prepared to deal with that? But as we say, we supporting the bill. I am thinking there must be a all-out no support for the bill because this bill, it's a mischievous bill that is introduced by the opposition. It could also lead to social unrest going down the road because they would have, there's a division in the society. Remember that after they come into office, they deliberately pass a law to fire CPAP, fire URP, and fire different people. That is not because, well, it's partly because these people up there who they take money from, they don't want to pay back. But it's all in that. Right? They take money from the people, they put a bus down in Hoover down there now. Them is some of them they use to go and campaign and pull people and tell them, hey, don't vote for PNM and so on. So they're going after the gangsters now after they take the thing. I am hearing is Mehu, I don't want to pronounce the name wrong, but the PRO start discarding everything that is the PNM and was saying, listen, yeah, I commenting, but these are things, remember I said that these things is worrying, I'm wondering, are we just here talking or if we want to really say, listen, we are not prepared to support this bill because this bill has certain intention. As Mr. Butcher pointed out, he didn't go into that because he's a diplomat, he's a politician. I am not. And I'm saying that this bill is targeting African people in the community and PNM activists. So we have to be careful when we go to the parliament and look to defend the bill and the PNM people or people in general in the community who cannot stand up for themselves. I'll cut it short.
Thank you. So thanks, Mr. Chief. All right, so the first thing is, the purpose of this consultation is exactly to achieve what we're doing here, to get the feedback of the population, to get the guidance of the population, and then, based on that feedback, General Council will meet, go to the Legislative Caucus, and the Legislative Caucus, based on the feedback of the people of this country, will take a decision whether to support the legislation or not. But before before one could be consulted on the legislation, one has to understand what the legislation says, which is why Mr. Lala took the time to go through the bill and to educate those who are listening on what the bill actually says, as opposed to what those in government have said to you the bill says. Because, Mr. Shade, you attribution based on what was said about the bill as opposed to what the bill actually says. Because you quoted the Minister of Defense in saying you could shoot people in your back. Nothing in this bill says that. And that is the point we keep making over and over and over, that the messaging of this bill has to be taken as very separate and apart from what the bill actually says. And if we have to take a decision on whether to support the bill or to reject the bill, it has to be on what is in the bill. It cannot be on what they say is in the bill, and therefore those who listen to our platform must be educated on what the facts are and be able to discern between the facts and the inflammatory nonsense that is said, which is misrepresentation of what the facts are. So insofar as one may wish to object to the legalization of someone being shot in their back, well, this bill simply does not allow that. And therefore we have to examine the bill for what it is in order to take a responsible decision on whether it is to be supported or it is to be rejected. So I do hope that both Mr. Butcher and yourself, sir, would appreciate the distinction between what the narrative is about the bill and what the bill actually says. I don't know if Mr. Lala wishes to add anything there.
Okay.
But I really hope that the distinction is clear, which is why it's not as easy as saying, well, we have a position on this bill because we are against shooting somebody back. That is of course the case. Nobody on this panel is going to support legalizing somebody being shot in their back. But that question does not arise because this piece of legislation does not legalize that.
Sule? Yeah. That's a concern, a significant concern, because there's something called cognitive dissonance. It means, basically it's a big fancy word, right? Just to say that you are coming to terms with a reality of something versus what you're thinking it is in your head. Imagine you are expecting your salary at the end of the month and you work out your bills, you're going to pay XYZ and you have everything worked out, this is how you're going to handle it. And then at the end of the month, they decide that they don't have money to pay you and they pay you half your salary, which was a very real reality for some people the other day. Coming to terms with that reality of not having the money that you was planning to have and all the plans that you've made and so on and all of those commitments, coming to terms with that, processing that in your brain creates a duality, right? That's cognitive dissonance. A concern that I think all of us would have here is that persons are being told one thing. So in your mind you are preparing for one thing. To get your gun, load up your matic and empty the clip. Whether the person turn their back, whatever, right? I suppose I cannot say I don't know if the wearing red is more bullets for them or not. I don't know. Right? I cannot speak to that. But what I can say is there's an expectation. So maybe they really have people there waiting in their minds with like a map set waiting for people to come on the property in red, right? Maybe. I don't know. But what we can say is the reality based on what is in the bill is totally different. And because of that cognitive dissonance, I think that people will ignore what is written and go with what is said. That is what you will have in your head and that is what you will go with because that is what is consistently being said to you. So I hear your concerns because people may start to act on what is said. People may go after communities and certain persons and populations because what is said to them, but not what is written. And they may not be able to process what is written because when you have two things that are conflicting, you go with the thing that is appeasing to you, right? So you don't understand what's going on this paper. This is not what is said to you. You got information that you could load up your matic and empty it, right? When you see red, you empty the clip, I guess, Right, so that is a concern. I do have that concern. I also have a concern that can lead to vigilantism, which has happened in the States and other places, that when people have this belief and they feel unsafe, that they gather in groups, put your guns together, and you start to police your own communities and your own areas and so on. That could be dangerous because it can target certain groups because of perceptions that exist. That is something that we definitely need to look out for.
Thank you, Sule. And ladies and gentlemen, as we are, yes, Sanjeev?
Last thing on that. So I like the way that Sule has really wrapped that up, because then it begs us to ask the question here now, and as a party, if I can, do we, in exercising our responsibility as a responsible opposition, do we consider rejecting what is in writing, or do we consider rejecting what they say is in writing? Because if we reject the narrative, which is untrue altogether, then wouldn't the narrative be that the opposition is opposing for opposing sake, or the opposition is opposing to legislation that can be helpful or is intended to help? And that is the purpose of having these consultations. Because as a responsible party, our first obligation is to educate and inform the people as to what is the truth. And we see the effect of the cognitive dissonance, as Sule has described it, in that even some of us sitting here really have accepted what they had to say, hook, line, and sinker, when it is absolutely different and almost opposite in black and white.
Thank you, Sanjeev. And ladies and gentlemen, we're coming down to the end of our time here for this particular consultation. We have 3 more questions, so we'll ask that we keep it within the parameters. And sir, name, location.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kerwin Henry, San Fernando East. All protocols observed. I have one question, quick question that I would like for you all the panel to answer. Can this law result into a local version of what happened to Trayvon Martin?
Yeah? Larry?
Yes, I would say yes, it could, because of the way property is defined in the legislation. So if I recall the facts in that matter in Florida, you had a 17-year-old young man walking in a gated community, and an altercation occurred, and he was shot by one of the residents of the community who relied on the stand your ground legislation and got the benefit of the doubt. Yes, that situation could occur under this legislation in Trinidad and Tobago in any gated community because of the way dwelling house is defined, as well as curtilage. It includes the area outside the dwelling house that is not public property, right? That would apply to the compound of a gated community, which is not public property.
Well, we have heard where the government is now thinking about or asking persons if they would like for their residents of their area to become
gated communities.
So they are now bringing in that aspect of it. So that is why this law for some persons are very uncomfortable.
Yeah, and that is why I used the term earlier about societal re-engineering. I think that we have to be honest with ourselves and understand that a lot of that is intended to take place with this legislation and its use with the firearm users license legislation. And in the consultations, we have to consider that and make a decision as to whether that is where we really want to go.
Thank you, Larry.
And Mr. Henry,
Sanjeev.
I guess we circling right back to whether this piece of legislation is introduced as part of a larger direction, policy direction of the government. And if so, why is it being introduced in this order? Why is it that certain things were said on the platform, yet we have this bill coming first with all of the messaging that it is not? These are the types of questions that we need to be really asking ourselves. What is the true motive? What is hoping to be achieved? What is the next piece of legislation to be introduced? What is happening in respect of the firearms unit of the TTPS? We've today seen somebody being appointed or intends to be appointed as the head of the NOC. All of these things cause us to have more questions than answers.
Okay, thank you. You have a follow-up question there, Mr. Estelle? We prefer on the mic, so at least we could hear it. Just a quick. Oh, okay. So we have two persons. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Can someone lower the mic there, please?
Good evening. I'll be very brief.
Sure.
My name is Hala Nasser. I'm from Chaguanas West. Listening to all that the persons have said here today, and even doing my own research, I realized that there's an illusion of safety being set upon the population. How do we seriously address this? Because there is no surety that there's going to be a positive outcome for the population. And added to that, a lot of the talk is about firearms. How can we be certain that with all the safety measures that are supposed to be put in place, that children do not access these devices?
Okay, thank you. Okay, Sule.
So I'll tackle the first part and then I'll leave the rest for the learned scholars among us, right? The first part is education. That is critical. So what is happening here today, this is critical. So what should be happening is these consultations, there should be education. We should be educating the public on not what is said, but what is actually in the bill itself. That education is what is critical, because when we educate you on what is in the bill and you have your questions answered, you can then make a desired you can act on that. So I think somebody earlier asked, well, what's the next step? What are we going to do when they realize the bill is not what it is? Well, then you make that determination. You decide if you're going to do whatever it is, whether you're going to march, or you're going to protest it, or you're going to placard, or you're going to write your representative to speak further on it, but you get to make a determination. Education is the first step, and I think that is what we have to do. We have to educate the population on the bill and have them understand that dissonance, the difference between what is being said and what is written here. That clarity is one of the first steps that needs to happen. Yeah? Good question. Second.
Okay. Yeah. So, a quick question.
Mr. Chairman, very quick. I really and truly want to strenuously register with Mr. Butcher and his concerns, and also our field officer. Now, one other important point I want to make here. A member of the upper house is to your left, and I do not know if she could tell me if they have done an analysis to determine how many votes are needed in the lower house and in the upper house for this legislation to pass. Now, I'll tell you something. Tobago is a very different society to Trinidad. And they have had some problems before, which I think they don't want to multiply. And if they need 27 votes in the lower house, they would have to get a vote from Tobago if the PNM is not giving it. So at the end of the day, we'll have to ask ourselves a question: will Tobago step forward and support introducing such a law into its society? Because it's not a bill for Trinidad, it's for Trinidad and Tobago. So I want to know if you have done an analysis to determine exactly how many votes are needed in the lower house and in the upper house in relation to this, and I'll listen to your comments.
Okay. Senator?
This bill, according to what is written here, requires a 3/5 majority. I think that's what's written here. So they will need the vote of Tobago, which from all, and this is the lower house, from what I'm seeing, the two Tobago MPs have been going toe-to-toe with the government. Everything the government has done, they have endorsed. I can't even say if they've made any individual contributions in the lower house separate from what the government is saying. I guess they consider themselves part of the government. So the same requirement will be in the upper house, 3/5 as well.
Okay, thank you. And our final question for tonight.
My name is Sean Lucas. I live in Chaguanas. I don't agree with this stand of your legislation. Firstly, and I'm saying it now, no legislation can stop our fundamental values, what we teach our children and grow our children with. Where's the commandment, thou shalt not kill? Are we creating a society of killers? Are we creating a society that everybody can have a gun and kill somebody? What are you going to tell my little child? That he's a killer, you kill a man, he's a human being. How are we going to deal with this situation where we want to grow a loving society of people, but we are making them more ignorant and angry in this country? Guns is not the answer. That is destruction. We're going to invade another country, we need guns. If we go back in history, weapons are made to kill people and invade their land. So all the standing grounds are just, it don't make no sense. We're going to stop people from taking their guns and coming out of their homes and using it outside. We can't stop that. Because we have cases where people are renting out guns. There are people who have legal firearms and they're renting it out and giving people to commit crimes and all this. I would say personally here, it can work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any comments? Sule?
I'll just make a quick comment, right? One of the fundamental things I think that needs to occur is trust. When you put your X wherever you choose to put it, right? By rising or setting sun or whatever, or you choose to put it by a Balisier, or wherever you choose to put your X, right? At that point, you trust that what has been said to you, you've been sold something that has convinced you to give support to this thing. So you've put your trust in your support at that in there. You also trust systems. You trust that whoever is in your government is going to seek your best interest. You're going to have income, jobs, so on and whatever. Trust. There's a basic trust that runs the society, so that we can go and do our jobs and we can function and we can live because there's that trust. What happens is when the trust is eroded, when people lose trust either in the government or in various systems and organizations, that's when you start to have an erosion of values and breakdown in your society, because now you don't trust that you're going to be able to feed your family. You don't trust that you're going to have a job. You don't trust. So that's where you have a problem. One of the major issues we have is that we do not trust our law enforcement. Of course, it's not helped when $1 million in drugs disappear from inside your evidence room and stuff like that, right? But we don't trust our law enforcement. And so some of the rhetoric that is being pushed by our leaders says to us, listen, we don't have to continue to trust the law enforcement. We are going to empower you to be your own law enforcement. When that happens is when we have a total eradication and a breakdown of our society. Because then what is the purpose of me having you there as a leader if I am now the one responsible for putting on my own security and having these systems in place? Therefore, I should elect myself. You should be the prime minister too, have your firearm. You should be the prime minister. You should run the country. You should do everything else, right? So I'm saying this to say that trust. Ask yourself, do you trust? Do you trust currently that your government is looking after your best interest? Do you trust your systems? Do you trust the police? And if that's not, you can't trust them, then we need to address that. As a society, we need to come together and find ways to address that. Maybe vote again and change governments. Maybe have system reform for police and so on and that kind of thing. Ask yourself, when you leave here today, do you trust this system? Do you trust the government? And how do you address that?
Thank you very much, Sule. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to a close of this segment of the National Consultation on Stand Your Ground legislation hosted by the People's National Movement. I thank you all. Can you please give yourselves a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? You have been very engaging, and you have certainly stirred up a lot of conversation, a lot of questions, and I'm sure a lot of things to think about on, on the level of our legislators, our MPs, and the party as well. I want to welcome back to the podium the chairman of the People's National Movement, the Honorable Marvin Gonzalez, to bring some closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Viash. I think Viash is also deserving of a round of applause. A job well done. So I think we've had a very fruitful night. The questions that were posed to the panel, I think they were professionally handled, and that you are more informed on what the government is proposing in this Stand Your Ground. And I do also hope that our viewers online live stream, they also are educated and more informed on what the government is proposing to do on your Stand Your Ground. I just want to make it abundantly clear that when the government put this policy and bill forward, the PNM did not advise itself. So this is the process, and I want us to leave here understanding the process. The bill, together with the supporting documents from the AG's office, were put before a team of attorneys, and they were asked by the party, on the instruction of the leadership of the party, to look at what the government is proposing to do in the bill and advise us on the main provisions in the bill, making a comparative analysis with what already exists in the common law of Trinidad and Tobago. The attorneys put together their work, and they presented to a joint caucus of the lower house and the upper house, meaning members of parliament and members of the Senate. A full presentation was done, and coming out of that presentation, we as legislators had a better understanding of what the government was proposing to do. The next phase of the process is what we are doing right now, which is to inform and educate the population on what the government is doing. All members of parliament in the lower house and in the upper house are mandated to participate in these proceedings either in person or virtually, so that we can listen to the views expressed by you, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, on what the government is proposing to do. And after listening to your views, then the caucus of the PNM will come again to determine our final position. You understand what is happening? And even before that, at the end of the consultation, a full and comprehensive report will be presented to the General Council of the PNM, and the General Council will take a position by which the caucus of the party will follow, and this is what we are going to go to Parliament with. So at this point in time, we are listening to the views expressed by the population, and when this consultation is carried out in South Trinidad, East, West, and in Tobago, the final report will be presented to the General Council of the party, and then the General Council will make a final decision on the party's position on this bill. I hope you are better informed of this. So thank you all very much. Thank you, members of the panel, for a job well done, and we look forward to our next consultation. Stand by, we'll agree on a date, but we propose to go to point 14 in our next rounds of consultation. God bless you, and reach home safely.